Hello, Mom.
Hello, Mum.
Yeah. My mom is my biggest fan, so I'm giving her a shout out. In fact, most of the views on YouTube from the Welcome series have probably come from her.
Aww. Hi, Mum. So what can Mum expect to see and learn in this episode, Isaac?
My mum's going to be learning about some of the terminology that we use, in security, right?
Let's get to it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do that. In previous Welcome series episodes, we dedicated a section of the series to vocabulary. In other words, what type of words, acronyms, phrases can you expect to come across when talking about network security? And also, what are the terms that you should be familiar with? The list we're going to cover now is certainly not extensive, but it should be enough to help you to understand the conversation and not be the outsider when it comes to network security. I really do encourage you to use tools like ChatGPT to get deeper into any of the topics that I'll discuss in this section. Curiosity is good. Before we dive in, it's also important to understand that some of these concepts I'll be talking about, they overlap in their functionality. You're not expected to remember them all and to know exactly where they are used and in which context. We're covering them here in this Welcome series so that you're not caught off guard, so that you're not left embarrassed because you don't know what it means. I didn't know some of them either, so don't feel bad. First up is the most common of all the terms, the firewall, right? The firewall. You'll hear this term over and over again, but what exactly is it? What do people mean when they say, "Oh, we have a firewall"? In many instances, they are saying it in a way that makes you think that having a firewall is the be-all and the end-all of security, as if it's all you needed to have a secure network. The truth is, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Having a firewall is an absolutely great idea, just like it is in the construction industry, where it has its origins. In fact, in the construction industry, a firewall serves as a fire-resistant barrier designed to prevent or to slow the spread of fire between different sections of a building. So it's a good idea. Absolutely. You should not have a computer network without at least one firewall in front of it. However, a poorly configured firewall is almost as good as no firewall at all. And for it to be effective, it's not about hundreds and hundreds of features and options. It's a lot more about implementing policy and rules that are clear, that are easy to understand, and easy to implement. If you need a PhD to do the basics well, there's something wrong. If you need a PhD to configure it correctly, please don't get the cheapest one that you can find. Get someone who knows what they are doing. It's important. So what exactly is a firewall? Well, most times it's a physical thing, a box that looks something or somewhat like a network switch, but not exclusively so. If you run Windows or Mac or Linux, they also have firewalls, software firewalls, and you should most definitely not disable those firewalls if you want to live a happy, long life. At its most basic, a firewall acts as a filter between your computer or network and the internet. It checks the data coming in and going out, and it decides whether to allow it through or to block it based on a set of rules which we often refer to as policy. One of the main purposes is also to prevent hackers, viruses, and other malicious programs from getting into your system and causing harm. The other is when it's used to control what websites or services people on your network can access. For example, a company might use a firewall to block certain websites to improve security or productivity. In short, a firewall is there to help protect your computer or network from online threats and keeps your data safe by controlling what is allowed in or allowed out. So even though a firewall is all of these things, a firewall just by itself is not enough to make sure that you have end-to-end security. And we'll cover some of these in the next few sections. I'm going to talk through four things here, but honestly, you really don't need to memorize them all. And just as an added bonus, we'll put the subheadings up on screen. And at the end of the episode, we will have a section where you can screenshot the information as kind of a support to help you if you ever need it and refer back to it. Another network security term you're going to come across is EDR, which stands for Endpoint Detection Response, EDR. Don't worry if you've never heard of this before. I'm going to break it down into simple terms. First, what's an endpoint? I'm glad you asked. Think of it as any device that you use that connects to the internet, like your laptop, your smartphone, even a server. EDR is all about keeping these devices safe from threats like viruses or hackers. Number two, incident response. When something suspicious is detected, EDR helps security teams understand exactly what happened, how the issue started, which files were affected, and how this thing spread. Without this type of information, your team is pretty much flying in the dark, and it's going to take a lot longer to identify what actually happened and what caused this. Number three, data collection and analysis. EDR collects data from your devices, such as what apps were running at the time, or maybe any unusual activity. It looks for signs of a security breach or vulnerability. Do you go to bed at night, the same time every night, and you start work on your computer every day at the same time? Well, if EDR detects activity on your computer, say browsing server directories between 2 and 3 in the morning, it's going to flag that as unusual network activity. And then number four, automated response. In some cases, EDR can automatically react to threats. For example, it can isolate infected devices or block harmful software before you even notice that something is wrong. In short, EDR is like having a security guard for every device connected to your network, making sure it stays safe from cyber attacks. Next up is XDR. Think of XDR, which stands for Extended Detection and Response, by the way, as EDR on steroids. It's an advanced integrity security solution that goes beyond just endpoint detection and response by bringing together data from multiple security layers, such as endpoints, which is what EDR was all about, but in addition, networks, servers, email, and cloud systems, and it brings it all into a single platform. If EDR was about endpoint, then the goal of XDR is to provide this end-to-end approach to detecting, responding to, and mitigating security threats against an entire organization's IT environment. Next up, SIEM. It stands for Security Information and Event Management. Are you already rolling your eyes at me? If you are, take a short break, right? Put the video on pause, try and put pen to paper to write down 3 or 4 points of what I've already covered before this. Can you remember what EDR stands for, or what the bionic version of EDR is called? Can you recall the difference between EDR and XDR? If you could do all of those, give yourself a pat on the back before we dive into SIEM. Go on. Okay, so back to SIEM. It's an end-to-end cybersecurity solution, and it gives real-time analysis of security alerts generated by applications, by software, programs, and by network hardware. SIEM systems collect, analyze, and store security data from multiple sources across an organization. And let me remind you that you're going to find, as a goal of all of these solutions, it does all of this for centralized monitoring and threat detection. This is a really important point. If you have to look at 400 screens to see everything going on across your network, you're on a hiding to nothing. Bringing all of this data into one location is really, really important. So instead of covering all the points and benefits that 𝗖𝗵 offers, and there's a lot of them, I think I can probably explain it better by going through how 𝗖𝗵 works. So the first stage is all about data collection, right? 𝗖𝗵 collects data from various log sources across the organization's infrastructure. Stuff like servers, applications, firewalls, databases, and a bunch of other devices as well. Then you have this process called normalization. This is where the data that's been collected is normalized so that events from different systems are formatted consistently, so that data can be analyzed more easily. Think of, for example, dates that come through from different systems with different ways. You get day, month, year, month, day, year. The normalization process standardizes all of that and makes it easy to search. Then comes correlation and analysis. This is where 𝗖𝗵 uses predefined rules or machine learning, ML for example, or AI algorithms to correlate data and detect patterns or anomalies that could indicate a security threat. What is normal? What is not normal? If a threat or suspicious behavior is detected, 𝗖𝗵 will generate an alert. Security teams can, of course, investigate those alerts to determine if there's a security breach or other issue. On the issue of reporting, 𝗖𝗵 solutions often include built-in capabilities that help organizations comply with various regulatory requirements such as HIPAA, GDPR, or PCI DSS. They can automatically generate these reports showing that security controls and monitoring are in place. And they're a really important tool, and a lot of companies use them. So what are the use cases for 𝗖𝗵? Detecting cyber threats, such as malware attacks, insider threats, phishing, or advanced persistent threats. Monitoring for compliance with security regulations and policy is another one. Incident response, providing data for investigating teams, security incidents, and responding to breaches. Network monitoring, keeping track of all network traffic, and of course identifying unusual activity. The next one is just, unforgettable, because it's called 𝗖𝗵. I mean, who can forget that, right? It's also really easy to explain, and if EDR, XDR, and 𝗖𝗵 rattled your brain a bit like it did mine, this one is a piece of cake. So what is it and what does it stand for? 𝗖𝗵 stands for Identity Access Management. It's the stuff that happens every single day when we unlock our computers or log on to the networks, etc. It's a framework of policies, of processes, and of technologies that ensure the right individuals have the appropriate access to technology in an organization. That's it. Simple. I mean, it's really easy. And 𝗖𝗵 is absolutely crucial for managing and controlling user access to systems and sensitive information. It enhances security, and of course it ensures compliance again with regulatory requirements. Who logged on, where, to what? So want it made a little bit simpler? I can even do that. User identification, let's talk about it. This is about declaring or claiming an identity through credentials such as usernames, password, biometrics, facial recognition, or multi-factor authentication. Remember, claiming. Think of it as a user telling the system that they are John Doe. I'm John Doe. Telling the system that you're John Doe and proving it are two very different things. This is where the next piece comes in, which is authentication. This is the process of proving the claim that you are John Doe before granting you access. Again, it can be done using passwords, security tokens, biometrics, multi-factor authentication, which requires multiple forms of authentication or verification. You say you're John Doe, okay, show me your identity, your driver's license, your passport, scan your fingerprints. This is a really important differential to understand. claiming to be someone, and then proving that you are that person. The next step is authorization. Once a user has been authenticated, IAM systems determine what that user is authorized to do. This involves granting or restricting access to resources, stuff like files, applications, databases, based on your predefined roles and permissions. Imagine for a minute that you work in HR. Once you've been identified and authenticated, IAM will then give you access to HR content. There's probably very little reason to give HR to engineering resources, although that's possible. But the inverse of that is probably a given. Almost all of us go through this every single day. We don't even notice it unless our password has expired or we've been fired before the mail was read and access to our systems revoked, right? It's so fast that at times you wonder whether it actually does all of these things. But if you don't believe it's working, put an incorrect username or password when you log on into those checkboxes and see if the system still lets you log in. If it does, you have some really serious conversation to have after this section. User management. IAM solutions manage the life cycle of user accounts, including creating when a user joins a company, modifying an account when an employee changes roles, and then deleting accounts as an employee leaves the organization. This just ensures that users have the correct level of access at all times. We're still on IAM here. Stay with me. Finish this section before you go for another cup of tea. Next up, access control policies. These are the rules, right? The rules that define who can access what resources and under what conditions. So generally speaking, there are two common types of access control models. The first one's called role-based access control, RBAC. And this is where users are assigned roles and each role has specific access rights. Then there is attribute-based access control, ABAC. And this is where access is granted based on user attributes such as their department, location, country, or job function. An example of this could be if you're in HR and your role probably excludes you from getting to an application like Jira and the engineering systems. All of you will know the next one, absolutely guaranteed, SSO, single sign-on. This allows users to access multiple applications or systems with a single set of login credentials. The biggest benefit of this is that it significantly reduces password fatigue, thank goodness, while still maintaining security. I hear you say, but one password then gives you access to everything. Well, not quite, because the clever security people got even more clever and came up with our next thing, which you're also going to be completely familiar with. You guessed it, multi-factor authentication, MFA. So what does it do? Well, it requires users to provide 2 or more verification factors before accessing a system. This might include something they know, for example, a password, something that they have, something like a smartphone, and something that they are, a fingerprint or other biometric data. So most of you watching this content would be, I'm pretty sure, very familiar with all these points that I identified as under IAM. To be honest with you, I didn't even know it was called IAM. I only found that out when I was doing the research. But I'm familiar with all of those. I use those every day. 2-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication. Every day I use that. It's knowledge, it's information, it's just packaged up and called IAM. And now, after IAM, we have PAM, right? PAM, which stands for Privileged Access Management, which if you work at Extreme and have ever tried to install an application on your computer, you know you have to ask nicely for permission. And if the security guards are in a good mood that day, you will be given PAM for a short period of time and then it will be automatically revoked. This is a very good thing, as it means that admins who normally have access to much higher functions of a computer system, a server, they are given protection by giving them the rights they need only when they need it, and then it's automatically revoked. And all of this is logged and auditable. We covered a lot in there, and there's still a bunch more to cover, but for now, let's call it quits for this episode. I really hope you were able to follow along and that you weren't overwhelmed. Security is a vast topic, and it's not easy. There's a lot of stuff to get your head around, and we're really just scratching the surface. But the more you know, the more confident you are.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. There's a lot of information there, so we hope you're taking your notes because shortly you'll be taking the exam.
And don't forget, if you just stay right till the end of the episode, you'll be able to take a screenshot of all the information, the summary of the information that we shared in this episode. If you prefer to actually get a PDF of that summary, you can scan this QR code on screen and it will already populate your email with the correct email address as well as a special code. Just hit send and you'll get that PDF in your mailbox. Thank you for watching.
And we'll see you in the next episode.